Boo.
Boo.
So once again the scheduled discussion week has turned into a buffer week.
No, to be fair, by discussing this film, a lot of the stuff I wanted to bring up in the discussion will be brought up anyway.
Well, that's good. Um, and so Sandy, um, to be fair, the the title is kind of me trolling everyone because while it is that is a famous line from The Sixth Sense, we're not talking about The Sixth Sense today. We're talking about Paranorman.
Ring being spooky.
Yes.
If you do hear dead people in your head, if they're telling you to do anything nasty, do go see a doctor about that. The doctor has special pills to shut them up. In all seriousness, if you suffer with a mental health condition like that,
yes, the scariest thing is my sense of humor.
Yeah, Ring's sense of it's very scary. Don't get Ring started on puns. But yes, in all seriousness, if you hear voices, that's a mental health concern. See a doctor. And that's about. I was going to say that's about as serious as I'm going to get, but this film took me down a dark path.
Yeah.
It made me think things, and I don't like it.
But so, hello to Rain if she's still in the chat, and hello to Scummer, and of course Sandy, and of course also anyone who is watching in the future or lurking at the moment.
Lurking like a ghosty.
Yeah. So, fun facts. I think I've said this before in an earlier stream, but if I had, if I have, you're going to hear it again. If I haven't, then, but not because of. So while this film didn't have anything to do with my deconversion, it ironically is one of the last films I saw before I deconverted.
Okay, so your mother let you watch this, but not Mary Poppins, is what I'm hearing.
No. It came out in 2012. So
I feel like we already knew each other in 2012.
Yeah. So this came out while I was in AIT.
Oh, is this the movie you had to buddy up with that couple to go to the movie?
Yeah. They wanted to go. They wanted to go to the movie, and so they needed a third wheel so they'd have a proper battle buddy pair. And I was the third wheel. Because I spent a lot of time as a designated battle buddy.
Yeah. I mean, better you than the guy who wanted to blow everyone up. Different story, different time. Yeah. Let's not go there.
Well, to be fair, he didn't make it to AIT.
No, that was basic, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Look, joining the army is dangerous, folks. I don't recommend it.
So, basically, this is like the last movie I saw in AIT, and I got deployed practically right out of AIT. And best I can place it, my deconversion was probably sometime during or quickly after my time in Afghanistan.
Yeah, so you finished AIT in late summer?
I graduated in November. This was in the base theater like the week
right, okay.
Yeah, right before we
So if I recall correctly, you graduated AIT, you were at base. I remember you telling me you were going to deploy in December.
Yeah.
Because that was the conversation that I finally looked at you and I was like, if I'm going to tell this person I love them, now's my chance.
Yeah.
And we had that discussion. And then 2 days later, I went home for my parents' wedding. Or something like that, or like a week later. So, yeah, that's part of our love story there, folks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, unfortunately, this is the only Leica Studios film I've seen.
This gave me like Tim Burton vibes.
Yeah.
But I've never really been into Tim Burton, so
Well,
that's the extent of my knowledge.
This was the second animated film produced by Leica. The first was Coraline.
Yes, it's that definitely that aesthetic.
And Leica's probably more famous for their later efforts like Kubo and the Two Strings, and then their most recent one, which was Missing Link, where I think Hugh Jackman voices Bigfoot.
You're saying Leica, and I just had to Google it because I genuinely thought you meant the old camera makers.
Yeah.
Leia.
No, it's Laika.
Okay. Synonyms. Homophones?
Homophones. Yeah.
Okay, so that gives it something because I'm aware that Coraline, etc., had these weirdly, deeply philosophical tones, and that is something I think we've learned this month about horror films or spooky films. They have a deeper philosophical axe to grind.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10. Oh, like even slasher movies are just Puritan fantasies of what they do to the misbehaving teenagers. Like there's always something deeper with them. And a lot of people write them off, which is
like
not necessarily a problem, but definitely a concern.
Even your typical slasher fic is usually a Puritan morality play, bloody.
Yeah, only the virgin has to be sacrificed, but then the virgin somehow is the only one who survives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or that being said, there is that conversion therapy camp slasher fic that's coming out or recently came out.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah. It's called They/Them.
Sorry, I bitch about Ring being funny, but I do find puns funny. Otherwise, we wouldn't be married.
Yeah,
and that's fantastic on so many levels. I need to, damn.
Like I should probably watch that movie, but probably not while it's dark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, this movie, however, despite having a spooky name and a spooky aesthetic, is first and foremost a family movie.
And Rain, no, this that bit was not a bit. There is literally a conversion therapy slasher movie called They/Them. It was being advertised this summer.
I've seen the billboard for it.
Yeah.
And now I'm curious. But yeah, so this is first and foremost a family movie, so it's not too gory. Yeah. It's all artistically done. There's not too much by way of jump scares, although there's one or two.
There is one or two, but for the most part, like this is I'd like to say that this is a loving deconstruction of the horror genre.
It's loving in the way an older sister lovingly deconstructs her younger brother's like entire sense of being by bullying him mercilessly.
Yeah. Well, what I mean is that they like every horror trope in this movie gets subverted.
It's
But
very
but instead of say like a Watchmen where it's like very the punchline is this genre is bad because of the tropes. It's let's poke fun at the tropes and build something new.
yeah. So for me, this film, and I'm aware I may cause World War III in the comments. Please hold your fire. To me, if The Princess Bride is a loving deconstruction of the fantasy fairy tale genre, in that sense, this is a loving deconstruction of the horror genre. It's broadly satirical, but it is well-meaning. There is a family vibe, and it's very well done. Like there were bits in this film where I was just like, I've seen that in another movie. I've seen that in another movie. I've seen that in another movie. But it brought it together really well. And it did have an actual plot, which is what some horror films lack. And by some, I mean the majority.
Well, and also, if like not only does it have a plot, it like smacks you over the head with the fact that it has a plot by foreshadowing just about everything.
Yeah. And I will point out, white people are crazy.
Yeah.
Just flat out, you people are crazy. Like, in all the horror movies, why are the only white people in the horror movies the ones that are like smack in the center of the horror, like the family that moves into the haunted house? Why are they apparently the only white people in America who don't own guns? Whose cars are not tanked to the brim, and who, like, I grew up in a superstitious household. I grew up Catholic with a Jamaican Indian mother. I grew up well superstitious.
Yeah.
I hear a funny noise at night. I ain't hanging around to find out if I need to call a plumber or a priest. I'm chipping. I'm out of there. No, stop it. Seriously. When if there's any lesson anyone wants to take from any horror movie, pay attention to the first 15 minutes. When a place looks like it's dilapidated or has a do not enter sign on the outside, don't go in. Can I just what you people have no sense of self-preservation. Like even if you don't believe in ghosts, like the houses are falling down. It's an old cemetery. There's gonna be holes in the ground and shit. Like, I have thoughts. I have a lot of thoughts on this.
Yeah.
And broadly, my thoughts are the people who die in horror movies. That Darwin Awards for the lot of them. Like, just line up the Darwin Awards. You can pick them up on the way out.
Yeah.
I just like what would. But yes, that brings me on to this movie because the kid in this movie, damn, it's a good job it was a kids' movie. Otherwise, that would have ended really different.
Yeah.
But it does play with the tropes of the genre really well, and I have thoughts.
Yeah. Also, Noodle's not really afraid of snakes.
Yeah, I'm nervous of snakes. I have a healthy respect for snakes.
Yeah.
In the same way, I have a healthy respect for like fluffy brown bears. Like, I don't want it. I will die trying to pet it, but but I'm also aware that I will die, so I will approach carefully to try and minimize that risk.
But if danger, why friend-shaped?
But if danger, why friend-shaped? If if
Yeah.
if scare, why boop? Why need boop? Why need boopy scare? Sorry, private joke, folks.
Yeah. It you know, it's all right.
It's all right, Ren. You're fine.
Yeah.
But yes, between you and Ren, you made me actually like snakes. I didn't used to like snakes.
Yeah.
Um. So yes.
Yeah.
Right. I want to talk about this kid starting off because I can. God, you know you're an adult when you actually agree with the adults in the movie, in the
Yeah.
kids' movie. I kind of get it. I get why the adults were concerned about him to start with. You've got this kid
Yeah.
who every aspect of his life revolves around death.
Yeah.
Like even his rucksack has a skull on it. For Christ's sake, it's
And he's got like all kinds of like all of his memorabilia are zombie and death and undead themed.
yeah. Bedroom's just coated in it. He's just lost his grandmother, who he was very close to. He's obviously look. Kids go through a lot. Kids are resilient, but those are warning signs.
Yeah.
Kids becoming obsessed with that kind of thing. Generally, it's fine. Like, generally, most kids, it's not going to cause an issue. But you've got a kid who's got all of these interests that are already possibly desensitizing him to certain aspects of the world. Then he loses his grandmother, which makes him very vulnerable emotionally. He's being bullied, he's isolated.
Also, there is now I'm saying this from the point of view of the other adults in this movie. There is an apparent family history of mental health issues.
Yes. So he ticks all the warning sign boxes.
Yeah.
Like, in another world, in another movie, this kid asks a girl out in school, and when she says no, he brings a gun to class. Like,
Yeah.
that's the way people think. Now, I want to do a bit of debunking here. There is no scientifically proven link between an interest in the occult, in the gory, in the violent, in fictional mediums, i.e., games, movies, books, music, thrash metal music, rock music, doing Ouija board, anything like that, games, and violence. There is no proven link. In fact, they've proven that people who enjoy gory, scary movies, like slashers, are kinder. They're doing studies that are showing that those people are more likely to respond with kindness in an unprompted situation. They are
Which,
more likely to step in if they see something that goes against their worldview.
which which makes sense because you're getting the catharsis from the media you consume instead of bottling it up and
Yeah,
snapping.
and it's not only that; it's these films. We'll get onto the But look, this is a very broad overgeneralization. But if you've got two people, one who's a Sunday morning Christian, you know what
Yeah.
I mean by that, and one who goes to the cinema every Sunday to watch a horror flick.
Yeah.
If I was pulled over by a cop in America, I know which one I'd want stood on the other side of the road. Because I know which one's going to pull their phone out and start filming.
Yeah.
and he's going to stand there. According to the preliminary findings of the studies, that is a very broad overgeneralization, and actually me creating that dichotomy of those two people doesn't exist in the studies. That's just me saying, look, someone who pretends like they give a shit and someone who likes horror movies, you know who you want on your team. And you know I'm in the Hannibal fandom, so again, gore comes with the territory. It's one of those things where it frightens people because they don't understand it. It frightens people because they think it's indicative of something wrong. Like, a lot of people think if you watch horror films, you must enjoy violence and that. And to an extent you do, but in fantasy. And a healthy human being with a healthy mental health and a good grasp of reality versus fiction is not gonna turn violent from playing violent video games or watching violent movies or listening to violent music. They're not going to do that. Now, teenagers are different because teenagers' brains are still forming and they're learning. They should have a grasp of reality versus fiction, and therefore 99.999 recurring % of teenagers, it should not be a cause for concern at all. But if you've got a teenager who is struggling to grasp those concepts, who doesn't understand the difference between fiction and reality, who is being dragged into maybe a friendship group that encourages them to take it beyond the fiction, then it's potentially a problem. You know, that it's, and we seem to think every time a new scare comes round about this kind of thing, about this kind of media, be it Call of Duty or, you know, when they were saying Eminem was going to make kids violent or Linkin Park was going to make kids violent, or you know, you could.
I mean, they like the fundies are circling around to D&D again.
D&D, Harry Potter's going to make them want to be witches. Like, no.
Fun thing that you mentioned. I won't put the banner up because I'm not talking about the channel Punching Bag. But another good thing about our discussion week kind of turning into a buffer week is there's a certain pastor who's holding another book burning tomorrow.
No comment.
Yeah.
But look, if you are worried that your child, your teenager, is getting too into this stuff, that's your cue to step up as a parent.
Yeah.
I know some. Look, we all know at least one goth, witchy kind of person who has the vibe, like dark velvet dresses, purple lipstick. She says wearing purple lipstick. But, you know, has that vibe. The Morticia vibe. You know, the Addams Family vibe. They are the loveliest people you will ever meet. To a man, they are the loveliest people you'll ever meet. Same with people who are into hard rock music and, you know, heavy metal music.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't judge people by what they enjoy or what they look like. Just because they look dangerous doesn't mean they are. I mean, we all know Scummer, and Scummer's into heavy metal. You know, it's. Yeah. Are you scared of Scummer? No. Scared of his football team, because I don't want to get emotionally involved and watch them lose. That was a low blow.
I mean, that being said, the film does introduce us to Norman through Norman's viewpoint at the beginning.
Yeah. And this is what I'm getting to. Because I'm talking about how you shouldn't judge people by their aesthetic, by what they like. and by their fictional escapism, choice of escapism. And I think it's really interesting in this film that all of the characters who have any kind of influence on the plot are in some way outsiders.
Yeah.
You've got Norman, who hates ghosts. You've got the fat kid. You've got the gay lad. You've got the family with the bully. You've got the family, and the bully looks grimy. He's clearly neglected at home. You've got the family with a creepy uncle no one talks about.
Yeah.
You've got mental health issues up the wazoo. You've got the only one who's anywhere near like normal is the sister.
Yeah.
Even the parents are like, the mother's clearly like hippie do, and the father's. There's a great line from the father that I love, and he says, "What is it? I'm all for that. I'm all for that hippie liberal stuff." But there's a comment he passes, and I just thought, yeah, it's just
like he's not like he's like a like trying like he like as conservative as he could be. He is like a conservative old school type guy living in essentially Salem, Massachusetts.
Yeah, I mean he's if you put him in the real world in the modern day, he's the guy who watches Fox News, who I wouldn't go so far as to call him MAGA because I don't think he's got that. I think he's liberal enough to have married a liberal woman and she'd keep him on the straight and narrow. But is it the straight and narrow if it's liberal politics? Well, it's definitely not straight. I don't know about narrow. But like he's clearly he's like you said, he's old school, small C conservative. He's probably raised in a rural family. He's very obviously working class. You get the vibe that he probably works in a factory, or maybe he's a miner. He's got that kind of vibe to him. He's not a bad person, but he's not necessarily open to new ideas.
Yeah.
He's
like
a boomer.
Yeah, I if I remember right, I think the line you're trying to remember is, "I'm okay with that liberal hippie parenting shit, but isn't this going a little too far?"
That's the line. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like at that point, he's letting her do the lion's share of the parenting, and he's trying to do his best, but he's got concerns.
Yeah.
And he's not necessarily open to new ideas. The mother strikes me as being very like she's obviously got issues. Like her brother's like the town nut.
Yeah.
There's problems there. Like the grandmother, just a very stereotypical grandmother. Not much by way of a personality there. But yeah, it's. And horror movies do this. So I think we've noticed that pattern. Horror movies create an in-group amongst the outsiders. And invite the audience into that. And I think that's really telling when you look at the demographics of horror movie fans. Generally, they're outsiders. They're people who've got something about them that doesn't gel with normal.
But now that you brought up the grandma, there's a nice little bit of foreshadowing because in the first scene, Norman's watching a zombie movie with
Yeah.
with his grandma, and this
Yeah.
zombie movie is very obviously a pastiche of all the B zombie
Mm-hmm.
flicks. Like there's even a boom in one of the shots.
Yeah, like there's even like the shot of her bent over with the ass in the air was just
Yeah,
hilarious. I was just like, yeah,
yeah.
that one's for the parents.
But she, but so her, the grandma is getting Norman to explain what's going on, and there's this line where if you're watching it the first time through, you won't catch it as foreshadowing. So spoiler warning for a 10-year-old movie. But she says to Norman, "Well, that's not very nice. Why don't they try to talk it out?"
Yeah. Thinking back on it, I pick up on it looking back, but I didn't pick up on it initially, obviously.
Yeah.
And they'll ruin their dinner.
Yeah.
Which is just classic grandmother lie. I love it.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about, seeing as we're talking about technical aspects of this film, I want to talk about the soundtrack. Because if the film itself is a loving deconstruction of the horror genre, the soundtrack is like the person who came up with the soundtrack clearly took one look at the horror genre and went, I am going to destroy you. Like, it was like 80s, it's like 80s cocaine fueled bit of boof kind of music.
Yeah.
That's just familiar enough on the ear that you think you've heard the songs before.
Yeah.
But not close enough that they're going to get a copyright hit.
Yeah, it was like
that's clearly what's going on there.
Like they were obviously going for a hybrid of 80s kids on bikes type soundtrack and 80s B horror flicks, score.
Yeah. Which, I mean, immediately dates this film, 2012. I will point out as well the fact that this kid has got a little 90s Nokia phone.
Yeah.
That was just, 2012. You're not giving an 11-year-old an iPhone in 2012.
Yeah.
I see the, I mean, I didn't have an iPhone in 2012, and I was not 11 years old. In 2012, was I 18, 19? Yeah, 18, 19 I was in 2012. I had a knockoff, well, I had a rip-off of a BlackBerry. I had a HTC. So you're not giving an 11-year-old an iPhone in that year, and that's really well done. And the entire aesthetic is very timeless. It's very small town America, timeless. As an outsider, it's what I imagine America. It's like that aesthetic. If you strip away the Leica filter of this is what we make our movies look like.
Yeah, of the obviously stop motion aesthetic.
Yeah. So you strip that away, that aesthetic, that is the aesthetic that I was shocked by when I came to America for the first time.
Yeah.
Because it's an aesthetic we see on a lot of movies, on a lot of TV shows. It's the Gilmore Girls aesthetic. It's that small town Americana vibe.
Yeah.
Which I always thought was a Hollywood invention, because I didn't believe anyone could live like that and not go absolutely insane. It's like Midsummer Murders. It's like you look at TV shows like Midsummer Murders that are like quaint English villages. And they exist, but not as much as they do on TV. And also, I really hope they don't exist in that kind of tonality, because, well, I couldn't live in them. They're too white for one thing, but I couldn't live in them. They just, they're that kind of place where you sort of look at it and you go, too heightened to be real. And then when you go there and you see actually it is a really good representation of what it looks like, you're like, how could anyone live like this?
Yeah. Well, and so there's also the fact where, you know, when you get to the downtown area of the town, everything's all witchy because this is this is asterisk not Salem.
Yeah. This is not Salem for copyright purposes.
Yeah.
Yes. For legal reasons, this is not Salem. And it's an interesting take. I will eventually drag you to Salem just so I can have a nosy around. That's going to happen. Deal with it. I do like that it's never stated outright, but there is a very anti-capitalist, anti-commercialization message to this film.
Go on.
She destroys all of the kitschy witch shops and the statue of the stereotypical old witch, and you get the young girl playing the witch who's like, why are they always old with a hooked nose? Because it's an anti-Semitic trope, dear.
Well,
yeah.
So I love the like. I love that scene when they're rehearsing the play because the overly dramatic theater teacher goes
again foreshadowing,
goes from all the grand, you're portraying the town's history, this is why you should care, put so much gusto into it, and
it
then
exists to sell key rings and posters.
Yeah, it goes from like this big dramatic speech about why it's so important, and then it's like, why do I? Well, if we care about history, why do I have to look like an old crone? It sells T-shirts and posters.
Yeah. There's an anti-commercialist vibe to it, but it's very subtly done, and it's done in such a way where it's all those things get destroyed because they're not representative of the truth and they are pure commercialization.
Yeah.
It's a very, if you want to compare it to the Christian mythos, don't at me about calling it the Christian mythos. It's a mythos. It's a story. It's turning the tables over in the temple, isn't it? That entire thing, that entire bit. It's an interesting message to put in a family movie in 2012. I mean, that was back when we had hope.
Yeah.
I think that was actually Obama's running. Was that? I'm sure I remember a poster of Obama with hope on the bottom of it in that weird kind of.
Yeah, I think that was. I think that was the campaign.
2012.
No, I think that was his first term.
Yes, when did his first term start, my dear?
2008.
Wow.
He started his second term in 2012 because I wasn't old enough to vote for him for his first term, and I was still too fundy to vote for him for his second term.
Yes, I remember that. I remember you talking to me about that.
Yeah.
Because I had you in one ear saying, I'm going to vote for Romney, and then I went to an all-night looking to cheer Obama on an election night.
Yeah.
And got really drunk.
Yeah.
Like, really drunk. I stayed up all night and then went straight to a lecture the morning after he was elected. I literally went back to my student digs, watched his speech, had a quick shower, got changed, and went to my first lecture. I'd not slept. I was still pissed. And the first lecture was on American politics. Because the teacher had said, your reading for this lecture is to watch the election or to at least know the election result before you arrive, if it's been called.
Yeah.
So I showed up there like still pissed, and I mean 6-7 bottles of wine pissed, like over the course of the night.
Yeah.
In my defense, I did have a big doner kebab at the end of it to try and sober up. So
Yeah.
Anyway, back on track.
Back on track.
2012, we still had
Yeah.
hope. We still had Obama in the White House. I don't even think Brexit was a consideration at that point. We the UK was a bit niche. We already had the condemned government by then, but
Yeah.
generally we had hope, and
Yeah.
we weren't. So this film having that underlying message is not necessarily something that would have been slammed as woke at the time, but probably would be now.
Yeah.
Like, can you imagine this film being released now? Just stop and imagine that for a moment. How that would go.
Oh yeah, like, well, so let me put it this way. In 2012, in 2012 it completely flew under the radar.
Mm-hmm.
Like Leica didn't get really any post Coraline attention until Kubo and the Two Strings.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, if it came out like around this year or the year before back, it'd probably be included in Pastor Locke's Bonfire of the Vanities.
Yeah, for certain. So it is there now. Again, I want to get on to talking about the horror tropes because I'm sure you've
Yeah.
got a lot to say about those. But for me, this film is, first and foremost, it's a family film. It's a film about friendship. It's a film about belief and about. Okay, I'll ask the
It's a
question.
film about accepting the other.
Yeah, as most semi-decent horror films are. And it's a film about recognizing why you don't accept the other and the dangers of that.
Yeah.
It's a very good lesson to teach kids. And I do appreciate that it's done with minimal jump scares because I don't like jump scares.
Yeah.
There were a few jokes in there if we're talking about how woke this film is. Few jokes I want to mention. First of all, the police officer's a black woman.
Yeah.
Just that fact on its own. There's a great line she gives where she walks into the mob as it's going on. And she walks up to the woman, she says, "Hey, you, why are you shooting at civilians? That's the police's job."
Yeah. Which.
And I just thought.
Which is.
I had to check when this film was made.
Yeah, which is really prescient, seeing as how BLM didn't become a thing until several months later.
Well, I mean, BLM was a thing, but it was not a.
It didn't explode on.
Yeah.
Yeah. It like we didn't get Ferguson until a couple years later.
Yeah. Ferguson was 2014, wasn't it?
Yeah. Something like that.
Yeah. It was 2014 because we drove near it.
Yeah.
Because my parents were ringing me like, "Are you anywhere near the riots?" I'm like, "That's like me asking you if you're anywhere near London."
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. There's some jokes in there that either aged really well or didn't age well, depending on how you want to take them.
Yeah.
But I think it's really interesting to point out those jokes because they say something about where we are now.
Now,
and what they say is that this was entirely predictable.
Yeah. Now, they're like, since we're talking about jokes that, you know, and
Landed.
landing in horror tropes, I'm gonna go to a joke that's about in the middle of the movie. It was one of my favorite bits when I first saw it. It's still one of my favorite bits. It's actually one of the bits where that actually made me want to talk about Paranorman.
Go on.
So it's when the zombies get actually into the town, and they see all the billboards for the gambling and the drinking and the witches, and then you get slapped in, and their reaction, the visual gag of your reaction, slaps you in the face with, "Oh yeah, these guys are Puritans."
Yeah. It's a great visual gag, and it's a great, and everything's witch themed.
Yeah,
It's a fantastic visual gag. It's hilarious.
and then there's the follow up gag where the townspeople see the zombies for the first time, and then the bar lady cocks a shotgun and shouts, "Kill them in the head!"
Yeah, which is about the stereotype of it's about as stereotypically American as it gets.
Yeah,
Um, there's a lot going on with those zombies
yeah,
because this whole thing of it's the Terminator thing, isn't it? Of
yeah,
it's all about your point of view.
yeah,
Um, and I think that this film's good has rewatch value even without that surprise.
yeah,
Because a lot of films, when they have a twist in them like that, they don't have rewatch value because the reason to watch the film is the twist.
yeah.
And then you get certain films that are actually
Where the twist
twist,
recolors your reading of the film.
yeah, and gives it the rewatch value. It's like
Yeah,
you watch this film for the first time, like I did, and they were trying to attack him, and then suddenly they weren't, and you follow along with that. But if I was to go back and rewatch it, I would know from the very beginning the zombies aren't trying to kill him, and that would colour my reception of the film.
yeah. That the zombies aren't the punishment for the town. The
The town is the
zombies are the
punishment
one.
for the
Well, yeah,
yeah
the zombies are the ones being punished.
yeah, and that reframes everything, and it does it in a really clever way. Whereas it's look to give you another media example. Everyone knew when Game of Thrones started that Ned Stark was going to die at the end of season 1.
Yeah,
That was like, yeah. And everyone, you shouldn't tell people, you shouldn't give spoilers, it'll ruin it. But the thing is, if you watch Game of Thrones knowing Ned Stark's going to die at the end of season 1, it doesn't ruin season 1 for you.
yeah,
What it does is you have to sit with that dread of knowing that everything this man does, that he thinks he's doing the right thing, is
yeah,
eventually going to come to nothing. And it creates, that's the rewatch value. You get that in, like I said, Terminator. Um, you get even Shakespeare does it. The
yeah,
first line of Romeo and Juliet, star-crossed lovers. You know at the start of Shakespeare, of Romeo and Juliet, exactly what's going
yeah,
to happen. These two are going to end up dead. And
yeah,
what you have to then do is sit with the dread of how is it going to happen? It's the
yeah,
same formula that old episodes of Columbo used to use. They showed you the killing at the start, and they even showed you who did the murder.
yeah,
It wasn't about finding out who did the murder, it was seeing how Columbo figured it out. That was
yeah,
interesting. Um, and there's got to be a certain level of intelligence in the writer's room to pull that off. Because it can be done really well in
yeah,
all those examples I've just listed. But there's examples where it's done really badly as well. For example, Quicksilver. Quicksilver in Endgame.
yeah,
That Endgame was set up to kill off Hawkeye. He's got this
Or
secret family.
you mean in Age of Ultron?
Age of Ultron, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's set up to kill Hawkeye. You're expecting it to kill Hawkeye because it's hitting all the beats. And then it kills off Quicksilver and quips about it to you. Like, it literally, the film stops, pauses, and looks at you and says, I bet you weren't expecting that. And thinks it's clever for doing that. That's how to do this trope badly.
Yeah.
Like, you don't need to wink that hard at the audience. You don't need to like, a twist is, for its own sake, is not a good twist. Like, generally, if your audience can tell where your plot's going, that's because it's a well-constructed plot.
So I mean I can think of one example where the twist for its own sake was a good thing.
Go on.
This stream.
Yeah, but again, you reveal it right at the start, and you didn't.
Yeah.
Sit on it. But yeah, there's that. The police joke I've got here. Firing at civilians. And then we come to the real crux of this movie and what its message is.
Yeah.
And I said to Ring before this stream, folks, I sat here and I said,
hold on. Do we want to mention the gay joke before we move on from jokes, or do we want to put a pin in that?
We'll put a pin in that because the gay joke comes at the end to round it off.
Yeah.
So it all goes together. I sat here and I said to Ring, this film was not scary. I mean, it's a kid's movie. It's got some horror tropes, but it wasn't scary. I didn't sit here jumping and hiding under the blanket.
Yeah.
Until the last 2 minutes of the film. Because this film is horrifying in the last 2 minutes, but only if you pay attention. Only if you pay attention and you can understand what's happening. And it's one of those films that leaves you with an unsettled feeling. And it leaves you with a sense of... It could tip it over into nihilism, but it leaves you with a sense of wondering about the nature of humanity and people.
Okay, I see where... Like, at first... I was like, okay, what was... And I think I see where you're going now.
Right. So we've had the mob. We had the teacher who, let's select the dogs of war and, let's destroy them.
Which was a great... That was another great joke where she jumps on the car for the mob, says the zombies went into the town hall and yells cry havoc and let slip the dogs of war, and the mob doesn't get it, and then she's like, let's go get them.
Yeah.
And
you see the following morning the police are there. There's the gag about, so do we take statements?
Yeah.
Which, nice gag. Incompetent rookie sidekick gag. But then you hear some of the things the people are saying.
Yeah.
And you hear one guy say, no, I was just doing what everyone else was doing. And another one say, it was a mob. And then you hear the news blame it on a random freak weather event.
Yeah.
And no one seems to have learned the lesson.
Yeah.
And that's frightening. That's on an existential level, that's frightening.
Yeah.
Because that is saying they will do anything to explain away, first of all, their own bad behavior without taking responsibility for it.
Yeah.
Because they were vicious and violent and ready to kill. But it also... It doesn't give any hope going forward.
Yeah.
Because the only people who really acknowledge what happened are Norman, his family, and his best mate.
Yeah.
and his best mate's brother. And
Well, I think Alvin's changed a bit.
a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
But you even see Alvin trying to use it to pick up girls. Like,
Yeah,
there's no real growth in any of these characters, and that's frightening.
yeah,
Because what's it going to take? And this is a question that was being asked at the time, and it's a question that I think is more pertinent now. What is it going to take for people to stand up, take responsibility, and make real long-term positive changes in the world?
yeah,
Like, I don't get the impression that that town was going to stop advertising itself as Witch Central. That it
yeah,
wasn't just going to rebuild the stores and carry on as it was.
yeah,
And that's frightening, because what does it then take?
yeah. Especially since there's no curse anymore because she's moved on.
Exactly. And it's one of those things where that's frightening in a different way. That's frightening on a level of, our humanity actually, do we deserve these second chances? And I mean, you can apply this question to a lot of very important real life questions.
Yeah,
Is it, what's it going to take for us to do something about climate change? What's
yeah,
it going to take? We've had a worldwide pandemic. Uh, Energy prices are rocketing. What's it going to take? What's it going to take for us to sort out racism?
yeah.
Like, your country
Nazis.
literally had an attempted coup
Yeah,
and hasn't
Nazis
sorted out racism.
Nazis stormed the Capitol. What's it gonna take?
Yeah. Like, I saw a tweet this week that said it was a teacher who teaches slavery in the American South who put a tweet out that said, every time I tell people that I teach slavery in the American South, they trip over themselves to tell me that their ancestors had nothing to do with it. Therefore, after 20 years, I must conclude that the only people upholding slavery were three clowns and a basset hound.
Yeah,
People don't want to admit their fuck ups. People
yeah,
don't want to change. People don't necessarily want to do the work. But you have to do the work. And it is uncomfortable. And it's the same argument. Why do you think there's this anti-CRT crowd going on?
yeah,
It's the same argument. And that's why this film's scary to me as an adult. As a kid, it's scary because, ooh, creepy monsters and that aesthetic.
yeah,
And, grown-ups are mean and grown-ups don't let you, you know. And if you've got a sensitive child, please be very careful about showing them this.
yeah.
Because I'm a sensitive adult and look what it's done to me.
Yeah, it's rated PG. I'd put it at a low PG-13.
Yeah, I wouldn't be letting anyone under the age of 12 watch this without adult supervision.
Yeah.
And I say that as the 8-year-old who was allowed to read Anne Frank unabridged.
Yeah.
Because you'd be surprised what gets kids and what doesn't.
Like, you say this as the more strictly anti-censorship, like as the strictly anti-censorship side of this channel, which is,
and I will say,
anti-censorship as a rule.
Yeah, anti-censorship as a rule, not as an exception, even on certain kids' media. But I say, as I always say with these things, it's not about censoring it. It's not about telling your kids they can't watch it. It's about, if you've got kids and they want to watch it with them. Have the discussion. Be a fucking parent.
Yeah.
And I have reasonable, I am reasonably confident that I don't need to say that to our audience. Our audience know that if I say this might give your kid nightmares, what that means is watch it with them. Reassure them it's not real. Talk to them about why it's frightening them. explain to them the cinematography and the technical aspects and the other things.
Yeah.
And if they get a deep existential dread because they realize that human beings are fundamentally garbage who won't change no matter what you throw at them, including zombies and a potential apocalypse, commiserate with them and don't talk down to them about that,
Yeah.
because they're right and they're going to have to get to grips with that at some point, and telling them that they're wrong or that they're just being sensitive is not going to help. So, look after your sensitive kids if you've got any out there.
Yeah.
I wish I'd had someone who said those things to me rather than just told me, "Oh, you get over it. You grow up. It's that's just how the world is." Well, yeah, that's how the world is. But you're their parent. You're supposed to put them right and make sure that they're comfortable with
Yeah.
it. Um,
And on a technical aspect, the stop motion is on point.
oh god, yeah, the stop motion is perfect. I
Yeah.
don't think there's a single point where I looked at the stop motion and thought that wasn't computer rendered.
Yeah.
So yeah, bang on. I can, if you'd have told me that was a traditional 3D animation a la Shrek, as
Yeah.
in it wasn't stop motion, it was animated.
Yeah.
Methodology wise, I'd have said, yeah, I believe that. Um, and it is one of those things where humans are scary. Okay, I've written that and I've
Yeah.
underlined it because yeah. But for me, in a weird way, this movie is the kids' version of Midnight Mass, which is a Netflix show that I encourage anyone to watch, unless you've got religious trauma, in which case be aware of what it's about before you watch it.
Yeah. So
I
yeah,
still
like
recommend watching it.
oh, okay. So you're probably gonna push me into watching it then.
For me, watching Midnight Mass, even though it's a fictional story, you watch Midnight Mass with the same head and approach as you would watch something like Schindler's List or Shooting
Yeah.
Dogs. It's not something you necessarily watch to enjoy. It's something you watch to learn from, and it's something you watch because a part of you understands that you have a duty to understand the message it's sending.
Yeah.
But do that in your own time, at your own pace, and with one eye on your own mental health. And don't let anyone force you into doing it before you're ready. And if they
Yeah.
try, yeah, I'll bite them or something. I don't know. I'll hiss at them. Um, but yeah, the this film has a lot of deep messages, as most kids' films do, most family films do.
Yeah.
Um, Wrapped up in a colourful package to get it past the parents. Um,
While including some jokes in there that only the parents will get, so they're not lost on, or so they don't just turn it on and ignore it.
yeah, and it's over the kids' heads, but the kids will pick up on it to an extent.
Yeah.
There are some jokes that I won't say didn't age well, because the police joke and the gay joke, they do age well because
Yeah.
they're lampooning a stereotype. Um, Unfortunately, the world has turned in such a way that stereotype in 2012, which was considered safe to put in a family movie because times are changing and it's never going to happen again.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we backslid,
Yeah.
and that's not the movie's fault. But yeah, again, if you've got, if you're a black family in America, you should probably be aware that there's a black female copper who jokes about shooting civilians in this film.
Yeah.
Because that's going to cause some consternation, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah, that's my $3 word for the day, consternation. Um, and
Yeah, because pretty much all of the police brutality jokes are put into her mouth.
yeah, which is, I mean, ACAB, and there's no such thing as a good cop, even a black female one, because the entire system is rotten. But that's gonna jar watching it now.
Yeah.
It's a bit like watching old episodes of The Simpsons with jokes about President Trump. Well,
Yeah.
we've had a President Trump now, so those hit different. And that's the kind of, just be aware of it. I wouldn't say, obviously, I wouldn't say don't watch it, but you have a right to know what you're getting into.
Yeah.
And those jokes, particularly if you're African American, may not sit well with you, and that's entirely valid. And no one has the right to tell you if they don't.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my opinion on there. As with most horror films, we did I Am Legend, we did American Psycho, we did
Silence of the
Silence
Lambs.
of the Lambs, and the one lesson we took from all of them is people make monsters.
Yeah.
And people are monsters. And we didn't watch it this month, but I'm going to quote another movie, and I'm going to say, a person is smart, people are stupid.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of these movies are portraying. And that's what a lot of these movies are saying, that people allow evil to flourish. All it takes for evil to flourish is for good people to stand by and do nothing.
And for, and for someone to be othered enough to be considered the monster.
Yeah. And so when you start thinking about who the monster is, don't forget to check the mirror.
Yeah.
It's a difficult concept, and it's difficult to grapple with. But if we're putting it in kids' films, it must be because we think it's an important lesson.
Yeah.
So we need to grasp it. And that's my takeaway from the whole month is put out a hand. And I'm not saying that, you are required to make friends with the oddball. I'm not saying that, the girl, the incel boy in school asks out has any responsibility to say yes. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, next time you look at someone and assume something about them because of the way they look, or what they like, or what you've been told about them, stop and think for a moment. And just think to yourself whether you're doing more harm than good in how you treat them. Kindness is in short supply in the world.
Yeah.
And I think we could do with more of it. And I don't mean niceness. I don't mean false smiles and customer service voice. I mean kindness. Give people a chance. You'd be surprised. Don't judge people based on a diagnosis or on aesthetic or on preference for things, as long as those preferences are legal and above board, and all those things. We're not talking about the extreme outliers, like no one's telling you to befriend a serial killer here.
Yeah.
Because they prefer their pork long. No one's saying that. What we're saying is, if someone who's into horror movies or who's a goth or who likes metal music, talk to them. See what interests them about it. Everyone has a rich inner life. Recognize it. And be kind. Above all else, I think.
And to also remember that to not let the people who are unkind to you turn you into the monster they think you are.
Yeah, that's
and like touching on like the trauma that being othered can do to a person is, once again, kind of deep for, a bit, like a deep, pretty deep for what you'd expect from a kids movie.
Is it though? Because we say
Yeah.
that a lot about kids movies. I feel like every kids movie we watch, we conclude with, that's pretty deep for a kids movie.
Well, okay. Now this is okay from what someone would stereotypically expect from a kids movie, which is kind of one of my, like, one of the pillars of my anti-censorship stance, because I've been on record, whether it be on stream or on Twitter, saying the infantilization of media is, of any form of media, is usually the first step in towards censoring it.
Mm-hmm.
And that it's easy to and it's really easy to dismiss animation in particular as, oh, it's just kiddie movies, because yeah, there are a lot of bright colors on the screen, so it's easier to make animated movies appealing to children, which means most animated movies are either kids movies or family movies, and thus they get, and because of that, animation does tend to get dismissed as something of a lesser art form.
It does. I mean, comic books suffer from the same problem.
Oh yes.
And we
and
also
that
have the
is
problem
a
of,
rant for another episode.
yeah, but we also have the problem of adult media being, I feel, by bad actors and by people without the best interests of anyone at heart,
Yeah.
infantilized. And by that I mean they put and again, I'm going to use Hannibal as the example because that's the fandom I'm in, that's the one I know.
Yeah.
The show is 18 in America. I think it's an 18 in the UK as well, but I don't have my DVD box at hand to check. I think it might be a 15 over here. It's gory. It's adult. It's about a serial killing cannibal. It's not primetime TV. It's shown at 11 o'clock at night, if it's shown at all. It's not for children.
Yeah.
Then they put it on Netflix and Amazon Prime. And suddenly the conversation around the show went from, isn't this great? Isn't this artistic? This is an adult show for adults, and adults are discussing it, to,
Yeah.
oh, think of the children. Oh, it's a bad, it's, if you like this, you must be this, and this. It became Puritan. There became a fandom battle that's still ongoing of,
Yeah.
things going on. Young people sticking their noses in, harassing adult content creators. And it snowballed.
Yeah.
And it's gotten quite vicious. People are regularly doxxed. There's regular suicide baiting. There's regular harassment. I've lost a Twitter account to it by daring to stand up and suggest that children shouldn't be watching this show if they can't handle it.
Yeah.
And I'm not the only one. By far, I'm not the only one. And people have been pushed to the brink mentally and emotionally.
Yeah.
We've seen examples of children being groomed by adults in exactly the way that your facial expression changing suggests. It's not a safe place to be as a fan on either side, I don't think, and there's not a lot of joy in the fandom anymore.
Yeah.
Because of this Puritan mentality of everything must be geared towards children must be catered to. Well, no. If I'm sat in a pub drinking a pint and some kid walks up to me and tells me I can't drink because they're there, I'm going to tell them to get the fuck out, because what are they doing in a pub? They're a child. And I think that's why, as much as I'm anti-censorship, there does need to be space for children to exist online in their own little bubble away from adults. We thought Tumblr was going to become it. The thing is with Tumblr banned adult content because of these children putting pressure on Tumblr and it looking bad, and these news stories about Tumblr being overly sexualized and everything else on there. And the Puritan pushback from that. So Tumblr banned adult content, and all the adults who wanted adult content upped and left. The problem is the children who had now got what they wanted followed us, because they didn't want a safe community. What they wanted was to drive those of us who were interested in adult content out off of the internet. They don't want us to exist.
Yeah.
And yes, you've heard that statement before about trans people, about gay people. That's what they do. First, they make it impossible for you to talk about your thing. Everyone remembers the scandal of the YouTube algorithm flagging anything to do with LGBT health or LGBT in general as sexual. Then they push you out, and they keep pushing you until you've got nowhere left to go. And then you go silent and you begin to self-censor. And if you don't begin to self-censor, they ramp up the violence until you get to the point where people are getting bomb threats, people are being swatted, people are getting pizza deliveries from stalkers on the internet who are coming after them because they dared watch a program and ship a pair of characters or have an artistic viewpoint on it, or dared to imagine that media is for adults.
Yeah.
And fandom is for adults and not just for children. And this is a bit of a rant, because the horror genre, you would think that the last place you'd have antis, fandom antis, Puritans, is the horror genre. But the kind of mental yoga they do to make their interest in it okay and yours not. You know the meme of every right-wing accusation is a confession?
Yeah.
That holds true for fandom antis. That well holds true. And it's a problem. And it's why I'm so staunchly anti-censorship, because we don't need to ban all media that children may possibly access. We don't need to say that you're not allowed to make X, Y, and Z about a thing. What we need to do is, from when they're old enough to walk and talk, we need to be educating kids on how to interact with media, how to understand whether media is appropriate for them, how to disengage from media if they find it uncomfortable and they're not interested in it, without moralizing about that fact to anyone else who doesn't. And frankly, to mind their own fucking business, because it's no Puritan's business what I do in the bedroom or what I enjoy. And that's what this is all. It's all part of the same struggle. And we've been saying in fandom for over a decade that this is a problem. And people just been, it's just internet drama, go out and touch grass. No, there is a direct link in the rhetoric, tactics, and general life approach of fandom antis and TERFs, of fandom antis and MAGA, of fandom antis and incels. It's the same behavior. And it all comes from the same place, this lack of understanding and this lack of willingness to accept that your point of view in the world is not the only one that matters. And that's why I'm anti-censorship. Because I will absolutely, you saw it. I was surprised when we watched Silence of the Lambs. I was expecting that to be a horrendous, transphobic shit show.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. But that's what people have built it up as over the years. And that was what I expected it to be. Like, my opinion before I saw Silence of the Lambs was, oh, it's going to be transphobic, it's going to be a problem, it's
Yeah.
all about how trans people are monsters who want to wear women's skin. It wasn't like that. And the people who took that message from it because that's what the message they walked in looking for. And it's just really irritating to me. Like, learn your history, learn your media understanding, have the decency to engage honestly before you have a go at something. And if you don't like something, back the fuck off. You don't have to like everything. And not everything people like is a moral battleground.
Yeah.
Like, so what? I like horror movies and I like fan fiction and I like, what are you going to do next? Tell me that you get to pick the flavor of ice cream I eat? Like, wait,
Yeah.
it's about control. And I'm not here for that.
And, just because you're making a comedic family romp lampooning all, like, every B horror movie out there, doesn't mean you can also, doesn't mean you cannot also make your climax literally the hero solving the issue by working through the antagonist's trauma.
Yeah, this film is definitely an argument for everyone needs therapy.
Yeah.
And just stop and listen.
Yeah.
Like,
'Cause-
don't look past the aesthetic and just listen to people.
And
You'd be surprised.
And, my point being is, just because a piece of media is marketed towards families and children doesn't mean that it has to be all sugar, no substance.
Yes. It also doesn't mean it has to be all moral virtue.
Yeah.
There's a reason they got rid of the Hays Code, folks.
Yeah.
You can learn a lot about life from stories. And you can learn as much about people from the bad characters in the stories as the good ones. And I'm generally of the opinion that you can probably learn more about life and people from the villains than the heroes in most stories.
Yeah.
Because the heroes are one-dimensional paragons of virtue who've never suffered a day in their lives. And if they have, they've always had the power of love, friendship, or like a secret prophecy to pick them up and get them going.
Yeah.
The villains are the ones who've seen the darkness of the world. And it's done something to them. And the thing people don't like is they don't like to grasp, and why people take offense to a lot of this is every single one of us is one bad day away from being the villain in someone else's story.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean by be kind.
And that's another great subversion of this movie is the heroic destiny that's sold at the beginning of the film isn't solving the problem. It's literally just a stopgap to keep things going as they were.
Mm-hmm. And the way you actually fix things is by stopping and thinking and paying attention and having a heart.
Yeah.
Like, just stop and think for a moment how gross it is that this town built an entire reputation around the murder, let's be clear here,
Yeah.
the murder of an 11-year-old girl.
Yeah.
And they built a kitschy, commercialized holiday destination from that.
Yeah.
It's like Wall Drug started because a man offered free ice water. Okay, fair. He didn't kill anyone. Well,
Yeah.
you know what I mean. He probably did, but that wasn't the central theme of his
Yeah.
entire business plan. And there is a sense of we have a attraction to the macabre,
Yeah.
and we like to make things flashy and bright and colourful in order to detract from the horror of it.
Yeah.
But that moment in this film where he sees the little girl and he looks at her and says, "She was just a little kid."
Yeah.
And you see the moment in the zombie's face, in the judge's face of, "I genuinely thought we were doing the right thing." And this is a problem that we have with modern politics. Everyone genuinely thinks they're on the right side.
Yeah.
Do I think there are some bad actors out there? Absolutely. I don't believe Tucker Carlson believes a word that comes out of his own mouth.
Yeah.
You know, he's found a bit that pays well and he's milking it. But there are going to be people who watch him and people adjacent to those people who genuinely think they're on the right track and they
Yeah.
mean well. And they think that they know the right answer. And the only difference between us on the, well, some of us more radical than others left of the political spectrum,
Yeah.
and those on the radical right are who is currently in power and who currently has the narrative power in the cultural zeitgeist, as it were.
Yeah.
And currently, they are the outsiders. And yeah, they want us all dead. They would crucify every last one of us. They think we're all paedophiles and sex pests or whatever they think of us. But I think it takes real maturity to also grasp that they're only doing what we're doing. They're just going about it a different way. They only want what's best for themselves, their families. They're doing their best with what they've got.
Yeah.
And what they happen to have is Tucker Carlson and Fox News and Jordan Peterson and that crowd.
And they have
but
a book.
They mean well. Yes, they have a book. But they mean well.
Yeah.
In the same way we mean well. We just view what's best we just have a different opinion on what's best. And that is a fundamental difference that I'm not asking anyone to change. Like, would I be happy if right-wingers suddenly came out and weren't right-wing anymore? Sure. Would they be happy if I suddenly came out and I wasn't left-wing anymore? Sure. And that's the point. Everyone has the best of intentions. Mostly. I say mostly. Like, not everyone is like a cackling evil villain. And it's an interesting thought experiment, but it's also something to carry with you that they may hate you, they may want you dead, they may want you wiped off the face of the earth, but they want that because someone told them that that was what was best for them, their family, and their loved ones.
Yeah.
And that's a hard pill to swallow. That's a really hard pill to swallow. That your enemy, that the people who want you dead only want what's best for themselves in the world.
Yeah.
And have all the best intentions. And that's what this film does really well. It sets that up.
And it does, to paraphrase from another franchise, fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering.
Yeah. On the other hand, demons run when a good man goes to war.
Yeah.
So, just because they mean well doesn't mean that you should let them get away with it either.
Yeah. Because, well, because the whole the whole curse is essentially what resulted from a spiral of fear, hatred, and suffering.
Yeah. I think that's a good place to end on.
Which is weird because we have a pin that we need to take out.
Yes. I say end on because that's all the deep philosophical.
Yeah.
This is a lesson you should have taken from this bit. Right, now on to the gay joke. Go on.
Yes. So this is probably now. Now I'm going to lead up to the gay joke by reminding the viewer that this film is basically a collection of every subversion of every trope in 80s horror you can, in B horror movies you can think of.
Yeah.
Which includes the trope of the breeding teenage pair.
Yeah, the cheerleader and the jock.
Yeah, and so there's a running gag throughout the movie of Norman's sister chasing after the fat kid's older brother because he's a total hunk.
I mean,
And
into that, but yeah.
Well, he's a total stereotypical.
Yeah, he's built,
he's a jock.
Yeah, like he's the jock. He's ginger, so he's not tall, dark, and handsome, but he's tall. He's muscular.
Like he's a bit thick in the head.
Yeah, he's a bit, not quite. He's never going to be valedictorian.
Yeah, because there's a great joke as they're driving down the road, and she says to him, "You've got great deltoids," and he says, "I swear I've never used deltoids."
Yeah. It's they're Danny and Sandy, aren't they? That's what they're supposed to be. And that's where it's going. She's chasing him, which again, subversion. It's normally the lad pining after the girl.
And he's, completely oblivious. Like there's another great subversion where the car gets wrecked, and he turns and he says in the girl's direction, "Oh baby, I swear we'll get through this. You're gonna be okay." And he's talking to the car.
Yeah, like he's just a jock to the extremes.
Yeah.
And then at the end she says, "Oh, do you want to go see a movie?"
And he replies, "Oh, my boyfriend would love that. He loves chick flicks."
Yeah. And then it cuts immediately to something else that's going on, and it's not commented on or anything.
Yeah.
And when we talk about we want representation in movies, that's what we mean.
Yeah.
Like, that's a young gay man who no one would have pegged.
Yeah.
And him being gay had no impact whatsoever on the story. He just happened to be gay. And it just happened to be something that he said in passing. And
the gay joke wasn't really like a joke in and of itself. It was more the punchline to the running joke of Norman's sister chasing him the entire movie.
Yeah. Like, she's obsessed with him. Like, she talks to her friends about him and she doesn't know he has a boyfriend.
Yeah.
Like, it's clearly lampooning that teenage, "Oh, I love him," but you don't know the first thing about him. But it's also, he's gay, and that's fine. And sure, she huffs about it, but she doesn't walk away from him. She doesn't cause a scene. It's just okay. So he's gay.
Yeah.
Big whoop. And that's a really nice. If you're going to do a gay joke in a kids movie, that's how you do it.
Yeah.
And it's cute. I like it.
Yeah.
Because I've heard you talk about this film, I was aware that joke was coming the whole way through. And I will say it does have rewatch value because you're sat there cackling at her hitting on him all the way through. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's fun.
Yeah. So I think that's about it.
Yeah. I will say that there was a great. There is a visual gag I just want to point out. When he's walking through the town and he sees the ghosts, there's a bird flying, choking, and it's got a plastic thing around its
Yeah.
head. Just that visual gag, like this
Yeah,
is a very woke movie. Okay, it would be woke
Yeah.
if it was released now, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
That's my overall takeaway. I think it's a good thing we need films like that.
Yeah. So if you're gonna, if you want to have a nice, cheery, slightly spooky movie to finish off spooky season with, Paranorman's a good way to go.
Paranorman's a good one. Don't pay too much attention if you don't like existential dread.
Yeah.
Like, you can just watch this as a popcorn movie. You don't have to go down the whole human beings are awful, nothing's ever going to change, existential crisis.
Yeah.
But this is Media Musings, and that's what I do, so deal with it.
Yeah. And so, coming up next week, we're starting on the American Myth Mega Month, which is going through November, going from November all the way through December, because Christmas is on a Sunday, so
we'll have a 2-week break.
Yeah, they're
Christmas is no one's going to want to tune into us on Christmas Day, and I'm going to be too hungover to do a stream on New Year's Day. Because that's how that goes. So yeah.
Well, yeah, but New Year's Day is the beginning of January.
Yeah, but it's still.
Yeah.
That time of year is just. Bleh.
Well, and also, so hopefully I'll be able to record the video I've been kind of puttering around at before Thanksgiving. But once we hit Thanksgiving week, we hit peak, so expect no extra content from me throughout peak.
That's valid. Ring works in logistics and parcel delivery, folks. Everything between the end of November and mid-January.
Well, yeah, so peak's gonna be up until the 24th. So.
But then you've got the backlog to clear, so mid-January.
Well, yeah, but at that point, that's when mandatory 6-day weekends.
That's fair, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, don't expect anything from Ring over the next few months. You never get anything from me, so don't expect anything from me either.
Yeah. Well, I mean, anything extra, because we are, keeping on with Media Musings because it's easy.
Yeah. So, first episode next week is...
Hamilton, I believe.
Hamilton, yes. So, come poised for a hissy fit.
Yes.
I'm going to say now it's a musical, therefore it is not required to be historically accurate. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to poke at its historical inaccuracies either.
But that being said, with the theme being American Myth Mega Month, best to go with an a presentation of how of America's founding myth.
Yes. And it is a myth. And if you are curious about that and want to know why, I can say that with so much certainty. Tune in next week.
Yep.
And you can find out then.
I mean, we even have our own Judas Iscariot.
Mm-hmm.
But with that, we'll move to tagline. So
take care, be good, and if you can't be good, remember, use your noodle.
And remember, the purpose of a storyteller is not to tell you how to think, but to give you questions to think on. Too often, we forget that.